Welcome to the Roetzel HealthLaw HotSpot. HealthLaw HotSpot is a podcast for physicians and health professionals that covers the legal issues and trends that affect the healthcare industry.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the HealthLaw HotSpot. I'm Ericka Adler, shareholder and health group practice leader at Roetzel and Andress. Today, I'm joined by Bill Hiltz. Bill is the CEO of Hiltz Associates and the creator of Dental Fraudbusters. Bill is a pioneer in the forensic investigation of frauds committed against dentists and has a proven track record uncovering theft in dental offices and resolving complex business matters. Bill actually has plenty of experience in the medical industry as well, and we're going to be talking about that. So basically today, our topic is going to be unethical business conduct in practices. Well, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Ericka. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, I'm very excited to talk with you, and I know you and I have actually worked together in the past.
Yeah.
And this is a really important topic that I hope all of our listeners are going to enjoy, because everyone who owns a practice is at risk of having something happen in their practice as a result of unethical conduct by an employee, owner, or somebody else in their practice, whether embezzlement or something else. Correct?
That's right. That is right. I mean, there are many threats. Most of the times when people think of fraud, they think it's going to be an employee, and I cover a lot of those bases as well and do investigations of employee dishonesty. But surprisingly, there are a number of business partnerships where you have two providers, two doctors who are in a partnership. And one is unjustly benefiting themselves at the expense of the other. And of course, those cases are a little bit longer to solve and settle than the straightforward embezzlement cases. As you had mentioned, I'll just give you a little bit of background here. I started this in about 2004. I used to sell software for dentists. And when I graduated with my MBA in 2001, I started doing consulting full-time for doctors. And I did a lot of transitions, some of the work that you do, mergers and acquisitions, tax planning, structure, trusts, and those sorts of things. And my wife's a dental hygienist, and she was working for Dr. Mike Arsenal. And she overheard one day, the receptionist was saying, she was always talking about the nice restaurants. And like these were $200, $300 a plate restaurants, which were a little bit outside of her realm of her income. I mean, she was a single woman. She had a little bit of a checkered past. And she was talking about these wonderful restaurants that she was eating at. So Janice came to me and she said, Bill, there's something going on with Sonia. Anyway, she went and she talked to the doctor who was my dentist and my friend. He graduated university a few years before me. And lo and behold, it was $60,000. She had stolen $60,000 from Blue Cross. And this was in collusion with a patient. So the interesting part here is that the doctor in this case here, this is my very first case. So I was shocked. I was like shock and awe. I said, wow, is this really happening? And so Sonia she would take cash receipts from the doctor, but she also was in collusion with a patient who had 5 children. And one of the better dental plans, like and same with medical plans, this was carte blanche. This was unlimited as long as it was a management senior executive level plan. Her husband was in management with the local government. And so what they did was Sonia submitted these insurance claims to Blue Cross for work that wasn't done. So it was about $60,000 in payments that Blue Cross had made directly to the patient for work that was not completed. So the long and the short of it was, I lived in a small city of about 400,000 people. I kept on doing consulting work, but then the phone rang again and again and again. And within the first year, and this is the truth, within the first year in our little small city, I had 6 cases of embezzlement in dental practices. And so I can't say this was a career choice, but it was, I'm interested in dentistry. I'm interested in the computers and, data analytics and financial systems. But I sort of got put into this by default. And here I am now almost 20 years later. And it's pretty much all I do, which is, forensic work for healthcare providers involved in disputes of employee dishonesty or unethical business conduct by a contractor, bookkeepers, accountants, consultants, business partners, family members. I've seen it all. So there's very little that surprises me these days.
So the typical practice will contact you when they've noticed something. Either there haven't been any cash payments, co-payments coming in, or the amount of claims being submitted don't match the number of patients coming in, or what other tips might you or tip
Yeah,
offs are there?
I'm gonna be a little bit pejorative here towards the healthcare profession and say that doctors are well suited and trained to be empathetic and understanding and put patients' interests far above their own. So I find that most doctors and healthcare providers are what I would say non-confrontational and avoid conflict. And they'll go out of their way, and we all avoid conflict. So most of them don't read the signals properly. They'll call, and I get a lot of what I'll call false positives, and I solve their problems over the phone in 20 minutes and tell them to go look somewhere else. They'll call and they'll see things like, oh, my accounts receivable has gone up, so I have no explanation why that's happened, or I'm seeing a lot of write-offs, and oftentimes there's legitimate or bona fide reasons for that. So I'll help the client go through. So I guess what I'm saying is that when healthcare providers call, I get two types. I get the uncertain ones who say, look, I don't understand my business system. Something's going on here, and I'd like to work it out. And it's something that I can probably tell them, look, you need to go and look at this, get this from the bank or get this from your credit card company, look at this and come back and tell me what you find. And they may find that there's a reasonable explanation for what they've seen. The other type are the ones where they've seen it or they've heard of it. Give you some examples. Patient overheard in the waiting room saying, but I paid in cash last time. Why does my statement say it's a credit card? And there's a discussion with the front desk. The best thing that healthcare providers can do, and there's two things that any healthcare provider should do if they want to have proper tone in their practice. And the first one is they had to have unimpeachable integrity themselves. And I know this is sort of serving up a bit of a platitude, but it's called tone at the top. And if you don't demonstrate ethical and transparent behavior with your staff, they're going to pick up on that. So if you do things to, well, let's just cut corners with insurance, or that's not covered, so let's put in something else that is covered. If you do those sorts of things, your staff will pick up on that, and that won't help you down the road. You have to have what I call unimpeachable integrity in your practice at all times. That's tone at the top. The second one is because most healthcare providers are not financial statement readers. They really don't understand the inner workings of their payment and billing systems. If you ask them to look at a medical claim, coding, or dental claim, their eyes roll in their head. So what should they be looking for? Well, it's a well established. It was a psychologist called Lewin. I forget his first name. Anyway, Lewin came up with an equation for people's behavior. And what he said is that a person's behavior is a function of their environment and the person. Well, that's really, he stole that from Darwin, because Darwin says evolution is a function of the environment and the organism. It gets hot, the organism changes, it evolves to adapt to its circumstance. But what Lewin was really getting at was that people's behavior will change if there's a change in their environment. Now, when someone is dishonest in a dental practice, in a medical practice, in any business, if there's, and particularly in a healthcare setting, because there's such a high level of trust, and everybody knows high level of trust, everything is supposed to be in confidence, patient care, all of those factors. And what the person has to do is they have to conceal their stealing. And in order to do that, they will start to exhibit certain types of behaviors which have been correlated after the fact to be consistent with fraud. And you've probably heard this bantered about by the ACFE, various fraud organizations, and there's some like living beyond your means. And this was the case with Sonia. She was overheard talking, single mom, had kids, and she's talking about eating at these wonderful restaurants. And she was buying a lot of clothes and spending a lot of money. That's a red flag. There may be an alternative or an alternate explanation. But some of the other ones would be things such as people are jumpy at work. If you come and you go to confront them about something, the reaction that you get is not consistent with what you're asking for. Reasonable questions, for example, the answers to a reasonable question would be delayed or deferred, or there'd be an alternate scenario or a very confusing answer where the doctor says, well, I guess you know your job. I don't know what you're doing, and they'll leave. People will resist outside involvement of any consultants. If you change accounting companies or go to change your billing software, which someone is very familiar with, they don't want any type of change at all. So you'll see those types of behaviors, people coming in late and leaving early. Now, at the end of this, you can probably put a link to my website. And there's other resources out there, but I put together a 26 questions, what I consider to be red flags, which would be behaviors that have been correlated to be consistent with dishonesty. Now, if you see these red flags, it doesn't mean that there's dishonesty. I had one doctor call me and said, I have an employee who's been with me for 5 years, and for the last 6 months, she's coming into work an hour and a half early. I said, what? Yep, coming into work. I got the alarm system. I can see when she's coming in. She's coming in, she's an hour early every day. I said, okay, why don't you go ask her? And he did. And you know what the answer was? I'm carpooling. The person she got a ride to work with had to be to work earlier. She had to travel 30 miles to work. So she said, okay, my car is broken, or for whatever reason, my husband needs the car. I'm going to carpool. Started coming in early. So there's, don't jump to conclusions, but you need to follow through and investigate any type of those anomalies. So again, going back to your question about what should doctors and healthcare providers look for, set the tone at the top and use your spidey sense, that qualitative, subjective sense that you have that says something doesn't seem to be right. And people give themselves away with their behavior every time. And a surprising number of frauds and embezzlements have been uncovered because of the subsequent inquiry or diligence after post observing certain behaviors. And you'll observe more of them as well. I mean, I think one of the biggest consistent ones I've seen is someone who leaves work. You have two employees, but one handles all the money. And that person's leaving work. They have to go away for a medical appointment. They're going to be sick for half a day. Their kids in school. They will call and give instructions and say, that pile of paper over in the corner over there, don't touch that. That's mine. I'll take care of it when I come back. So what they do is they try and control the environment in absentia. When they're not in the practice, they give direction to the people in the practice on what to do and what not to do. And they'll also go so far as to give direction as to say, if this certain person comes in, or a certain vendor, or if a certain doctor or insurance company calls, tell them I'll get back to them.
Right.
Nobody's that important.
Some of what I've seen are people who lock their offices or their drawer when they're on vacation. They might be the only ones who have passwords on the computer system. And the other thing that I've noted, and I think I've mentioned this on my podcast before, is that in many instances where I've been involved with practices who've discovered fraud and embezzlement, it's been very long-term and trusted employees who've been there for many years. They may know the practice and be the closest person to the healthcare provider, very trusted. You would never even question them. They're not what you would think is that young, desperate employee. Yeah. Often it's someone you trust. And sometimes they're having like a life event, maybe they're going through divorce or bankruptcy or something like that. Have you seen that as well then?
I have. And you've raised a really good point here. Most embezzlers in healthcare practices are first-time offenders, and they don't go on to reoffend. They're usually mature. Their kids are sometimes older. They're not 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, mostly. I'm saying the majority of 80%. Right. They've worked with the doctor for a long time, and they didn't intend to steal or even have any thoughts about stealing when they were first hired. They turn out to be loyal and hardworking employees, and they want to earn and gain your favor. And of course, over time, they do gain your trust. But what happens is, again, if you go back to Lewin's equation, the behavior of a person is the function of their environment. And I'm going to postulate something here that I get a lot of head shaking, but I'm going to say all humans are corruptible, every single one of us, under the right pressure. And I don't need to get into a philosophical debate about stealing a loaf of bread if you're hungry, or stealing your medicine if your kid is going to die. But we will all corrupt our ethics under certain circumstances. So when you have something happen in an environment at home, and again, it could be, and interestingly, a lot of the people, I'm talking about employees, not business partners, but the employees who steal are predominantly female that tend to work in healthcare settings. And there's some interesting research around female embezzlers versus male embezzlers. Male embezzlers tend to steal for different reasons, different motivations, and different underlying motivations. They tend to steal for themselves, to steal for prestige, to steal for a sense of revenge or restitution that they want, or they may just have the gambling addictions, or all the other types of addictions that can cost a lot of money, like having extramarital affairs and so on. Females tend to steal, and this is part of the technique of neutralization, because when you steal, you had to tell yourself, because this is someone's been working in the practice for a while, right? They didn't intend to steal when they first started working there. They've been there for a number of years. And now something has happened in their life and they're about to cross that line. And they had to justify it. They had to rationalize it. They had to say to themselves, I'm really not a bad person. And in order to do that, they have to neutralize their thought process. And because, I'm not going to say because they're female, but the research shows that embezzlers have been convicted, female embezzlers tend to steal for what's called a higher loyalty. And I have seen that so many times. And a higher loyalty would be, my son's in trouble with the law. Therefore, I'm justified in doing it because I have to do it for a loved one. My grandkids need something. My husband is sick. He has medical bills. So you'll see, and because they steal for what's called higher loyalties, and this is Dr. Linda Grounds who's done this research, that is a very compelling and high pressure situation for somebody to be in, even more so than gambling. Someone who has a gambling addiction. I mean, so you toss out all the old cliches, somebody's gambler, they're a drug addict, they've got some sort of, whatever addiction that they have, a vice, we'll call it, whatever behavior. But when you start to steal for family members, or you start to steal for higher loyalties, it becomes very easy to neutralize the fact that you think you're doing something bad. And the characteristics usually is someone who's been there for a long time. They know what the doctor looks at, but more importantly, they know what the doctor doesn't look at. Thursdays, kids go to soccer. Wednesdays, music lessons. The doctor's going to be leaving early. And they can even schedule patients that coming into the practice that have certain payment methods that they can exploit because they know the doctor's going to be busy. If they've got a heavy, busy day with long procedures in the back, they can use that to their advantage because they're left alone at the front. So they know what the doctors look at. They know what the doctors don't look at. And at some point in time, something goes wrong in their life and they decide to cross that line.
One of the things I have found surprising is that we've had people steal from practices, and the practice owner, because they have loved this person and been with them for so long, doesn't want everybody to know about it, doesn't necessarily want to file a police report. They may terminate the person, or maybe there's something swept under the rug where the money's paid back or something. And I've had multiple practices hire the same person.
Yes.
That same person steal from practices over and over again.
Yes.
And
yes.
even when somebody calls for a reference, a practice will kind of be hesitant to say anything about that person. And it's very frustrating because we see this crime perpetuating itself over and over again.
Yeah, well, I've got an answer for that one. And you're right. Now, I talked about most embezzlers didn't intend to steal when they were first hired. But we're talking about serial embezzlers. And that's the 10%, 1 in 10, or whatever the number is. And they'll set forth and start stealing from you from day one. So if you hire somebody who has a checkered past and you don't do a background check, or perhaps they haven't made it into the criminal system yet, they haven't had a bankruptcy, they haven't had a felony or any type of indictment, or an arrest, then you're going to hire them on your gut feeling. And a lot of times, practices will hire somebody if they say, do you know our billing software? Do you understand that? Yep. And you breathe. Okay. Can you talk the terminology? Yes, you're hired. Simple. They hire them on the spot. If you hire someone who has stolen in another practice, like you've seen, they'll start to steal almost from day one. And they can do a terrific amount of damage, incredible amount of damage. And you're right. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to say that half of the people who call me that I know have employee embezzlement choose to do nothing. Not half the people who call, because everybody who calls doesn't have a problem. They just call and they want to have a consult and get some answers. But I get a surprising number, and I'm going to say half, decide to walk away. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. First of all, they may know their family. It may be personal. And also because of the intimate environment of most of these small healthcare practices, not in a huge hospital setting, but in a private practice setting. Sometimes the employees know things that the doctor doesn't want them to talk about. It could be some behavior that the doctor's had. So there's a lot of different reasons why they choose to do nothing. I think perhaps most of them is they don't want to be embarrassed. I had one client say to me, well, look, I know it's only $70,000 only. And I said, well, it could be a lot more. We really haven't. Yeah, not worth the hassle. Not worth the hassle. I just don't want to deal with it. I said, fine. This is a medical specialist. She paid the fee and went on. Now that person did go to work in another practice. So what's the right thing to do if you find an employee stealing? And this is the dilemma that a lot of clients have. And I'm saying, whatever you choose to do is right. If you want to go both guns blazing and have accountability and prosecution and restitution, if somebody has committed a crime or stolen from you, then we can chase that down and we can try and get those remedies. On the other hand, if someone has stolen from you and you don't choose to do anything, so the question in their mind is, well, if I'm going to do something, I've got to get lawyers. Of course, they always say lawyers are expensive, and I got to get police involved. I got to pay an accountant. I got to pay you fees. It's just not worth the effort. You can still remove somebody from your practice and make sure that you do it in the proper way. That's where people like employment lawyers come in for terminating people for cause or for misconduct. And, you can go down that pathway and still not have to press any criminal charges or seek any type of recovery from your employee dishonesty coverage.
Right.
If you don't want to do anything else, here's how you answer the reference question, because they're afraid. Hello, hi, it's Dr. Joe, and I've got Sheila here, and Sheila says she used to work for you, and what can you tell me about her? And I'm going to say, hey, Dr. Joe, I'm going to answer 3 questions and only 3 questions. How long did she work for me? When was she hired? When did she leave? What was her position? And would I rehire? Now, ask me the questions. And when you get to the would you rehire question, you can use whatever 4-letter expletive in front of it with a big euphemism, no. Right. Now, if you can't read between the lines, because the healthcare provider is so afraid of litigation. They're so afraid of being sued by patients. Every step, it's a minefield. And you work in this industry, so they want to take baby steps. So I don't want to say anything bad about her. She'll probably end up suing me. We've seen that.
And you and I have both seen that
happen. So, exactly.
One other thing I wanted to cover before we wrap up here is that we've been talking about that employee who embezzles in the practice, but you and I have seen other types of issues arise where you need to get involved and do kind of a forensic examination of a practice. Can you speak to some examples of that? Because I think a lot of listeners are really affected by that as well.
Well, there's the 2 examples. There's either something that's gone on in a transaction where, like in a merger or acquisition or a new practice transaction, where there could be misrepresentation. A lot of I'll just give you one quick example. Had a practice in California. The doctor bought the practice, paid 1.6 or something like that. It was a few years ago. Couldn't hit the billing numbers. Same staff, same patient base, same number of providers in the practice. Couldn't hit the billing numbers. The billing numbers were like $400,000 a year less than what the previous doctor. He said, what's going on? So anyway, he had a consult with me. Everything was the same except for 2 things. The selling doctor, the seller, left, and the seller's spouse worked in the practice as the billing administrator. In the years running up to the sale of the practice, fees were overbilled. Insurance companies were overbilled for procedures that weren't really performed. A lot of these were time-based procedures. So, they're based on the number of quarter-hour units, so how many units there are. These would be dental procedures. And so what happened is when the new purchaser bought the practice and started, I'll say, billing ethically, in other words, I did this work, I'm going to bill for this work, I'm not going to bill for something else to get more benefits. wasn't able to hit those numbers. Luckily enough, it was settled. We had a sort of a conciliatory seller when we brought this to his attention, and how that was worked out was the same way Medicare does it. It's called a zero-sum day. If you're going to start billing for procedures, and we had these 3 dental hygienists that were working in the practice full time. They only work 7 hours a day. That's 21 billable hours a day. The same thing in law. If you're working 40 hours a week, you can't bill 50, although that happens. So that's what I did, and came up with a zero day analysis and showed it to him. I showed it to our client, and the attorney contacted, and there was a settlement. The other one is when you've got a business partner that's doing something that you don't want them to be doing. So it could be ordering supply. I had some examples. Ordering supplies. This was going to open up a satellite practice, open up a secondary practice outside the area in a smaller town, and started ordering supplies from the primary practice and shuffling them out the door. $50,000, $60,000 worth of supplies to stock up the new office. Both of these doctors were in a cost sharing arrangement, so he ended up paying half. I've seen those things. I've also seen instances where there's compensation formulas between doctors, and they don't go out and hire an independent bookkeeper. So one doctor says, "Hey, I've got some business sparts. I'll write the checks every month. So here's your 20,000. So they're doing the checks based on collections. Go back and do an audit. You find out for the last 5 years, the doctor who's been writing the checks has been padding their payroll, same as an employee putting in a few extra hours. I just finished a case of that where the 2 doctors, and although it's not a significant amount of money, it was over a 5-year period. One doctor was overpaid $250,000 over 5 years because of the manner in which the calculation of compensation between the doctors was being done. He admitted no wrongdoing, but it was easy to see that it wasn't a reasonable way to calculate it. And he paid back into the corporation. So and I think those 2 now are seeking to split their corporation because they just can't get along with each other anymore. Right. So yeah, I see those as well. I mean, and I've seen spouses do the same thing. I haven't seen mothers or fathers do it. Not yet. I don't think I will, but I've seen brothers and sisters and cousins, and I've seen accountants and bookkeepers.
Well, I think the best thing to do then is just make sure that you actually have a team of people that you can rely on who from time to time are looking at things for you. One of the pieces of advice I give is that there should never be just one person that controls anything, whether it's the collecting of the money, the depositing of the money, the review of the credit card payments, or anything. You should always cross-train and then have a trusted outside advisor of some sort, usually some financial, looking at things, whether it's quarterly or whatever, just to make sure that you have a better chance of being able to discover some of these types of things, if possible. Not always possible.
I think most cases, like this is not rocket science. This is not trying to solve Bernie Madoff, where you had to have a whole floor of PricewaterhouseCoopers for 5 years looking at stuff. This is not. I mean, these are people who are, in most cases they may have, they don't have university education, and they're not CPAs. They're not fraud experts. They're people who work in an administrative position and collect payments and record payments in a software system and do bank statements and do up the bank records for the doctor. So there's really not a lot of ways to steal, and but conceal. They can conceal it in a lot of other ways. You can probably eliminate your risk of embezzlement in a healthcare practice by doing 10 things or less, and eliminate it by 80 or 90%. You really can. You had mentioned earlier about someone, getting the trust, and trust is one of the essential ingredients. Trust, opportunity, and motivation. The motivation you can't control as a practice owner. That happens outside the practice. New relationships, new pressures in the family. You can't control the motivation. Opportunity, you can control the opportunity. And the trust, you can trust your staff. You can be cordial, but they're not family members. And don't think that they are. If you think your staff are loyal and they take a bullet for you and they're your family, stop paying them and see how long they hang around. And they won't. They'll be gone. But your family will come to work if you don't pay them. So, you just don't treat people like family. So the things that you do, first of all, if you have a corporate card or your own personal card that you give staff for buying supplies or buying things for the practice, have a small limit on it. Don't have an oversized limit on it, and always review the statements. Try and get most of your payments electronically. I mean, I'm amazed Delta still sends out checks in the mail. I mean, this is 2022, folks. Get your money electronically deposited. Take credit cards. You will get some over-the-counter cash, but most practices that's gone down in the last 10 years. The amount of cash that comes in is shrinking and shrinking with more electronic funds. Don't go home and leave your staff in the practice. Your staff don't need, if you've got an 8-hour day and you're home in 8 hours, your staff don't need to be there 8.5 hours every day saying, doctor, we're so busy, we got to catch up on all this stuff. No, don't give your staff keys to the practice so they can come and go when they want after hours. Here's the key, here's the alarm code, you can come and go as you please. No, you'll show up when I come into work. And if you're in a group practice, it makes it a little bit easier. Do the bank deposits yourself always, or have them give them to you and go once a week. Get a check scanner. This is a real good for smaller practices. If you're getting checks in the mail and check theft, if you go on my blog and look, there's hundreds of stories of healthcare providers who've had hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen because checks from insurance companies are coming in, and those checks are being deposited into an ATM. The bank waives all liability on that. That's another story. But if you are getting checks, why would you have them come into the front desk and someone open the check and then they post the payment and give you the check? Have the check sent somewhere else. And if you don't have time yourself, have them sent to a bank. Have your bank do a lockbox and have your bank open the checks up. They'll deposit the checks into your bank and they'll send the little explanation of benefits of the summary, what the check is for. They'll scan that and send it back to your practice. The people who post the payments for patient treatment in your software don't need to hold on to the instrument of value. They just need to have a record that it's been paid and to post that. If you do those few things, you're going to reduce your chances of being stolen from. I'm going to be at the job, but you're going to reduce your chances of being stolen from quite significantly. But Ericka, it all goes back to trust. And you work with healthcare providers a lot, and that's it. They are very non-confrontational, very trusting, and always, I'll use the word pure of self-interest. And that's what I want when I'm talking to my doctor. I don't want them thinking about anything else but me and my needs. And that's their focus. And that's the way most of them think. So they end up being embezzled. They end up being victims of dishonesty by unethical people who take advantage of it.
Great. Well, I mean, that's so much advice, really helpful to everybody listening. What we're going to do is we're going to post your website. And as Bill mentioned, you can go on there and check out what some of the red flags are that you should be looking for in your practice. Could be going on right underneath your nose and you don't even realize it. I would bet any number of practices just have no idea what's really going on. And so hopefully this might be a little bit of a wake-up call for them, right?
Statistics for med spas, 80% will have been embezzled or will be embezzled, or 80% will have been embezzled. For dental practices, it runs about 60%. So that's your lifetime career average of somebody being dishonest in your practice. And again, we didn't talk about the economic disparity between the dentists and the employees. I have to tell you, drive an older car to work. Don't talk about your personal life. If you have wealth, don't display it at work and don't talk about it at work, because that will cause a disconnect, cognitive dissonance, and people will feel, again, one of the techniques of neutralization is, well, it didn't hurt them. Had one person, I know we've got to stop our podcast, but this person was stealing and was stealing probably about $5,000 a month and had been doing it for about a year. That's an extra take-home pay and no tax, $5,000 a month. Guess what? Doctor came in and said, hey, we're taking all our kids. We're going wherever it was, Aspen, Vale, Caribbean, flying away, and then came back and brought in the new car that he just traded in. And when she was caught, and I actually fired her from the practice, and talking to her, she said, well, he could afford it. The money I was taking, the $5,000 a month I was taking, didn't stop him from going on vacation and getting another new car in 4 years. So that's when people will start to really ramp it up. If you want to figure out how much they'll steal, it's usually about 5% of revenue or less. So if you're billing them, if you're collecting $1 million a year, someone can easily steal 50,000 a year, an employee, 50,000 a year, and you won't miss it. You just won't miss it. It'll fly under your radar.
Crazy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Bill. We've got to run and wrap things up. Bill Hiltz, everyone. You'll see his link when we post this podcast. Feel free to reach out to him. He's a great resource if you have concerns about your practice. We thank you so much for joining us at the HealthLaw Hotspot, and we'll see you next time. You can check out some of our other podcasts at ralaw.com. And of course, always feel free to reach out with any questions. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
The Roetzel HealthLaw Hotspot is made available by the firm and its attorneys for educational purposes and to provide general information, not to provide specific legal advice. Use of the Roetzel HealthLaw Hotspot does not create an attorney-client relationship between you and the firm or any of its attorneys. The Roetzel HealthLaw Hotspot should not be used as a substitute for competent legal advice, and you should contact an attorney in your state about any legal needs or questions you may have.